Hello, and you are very welcome to today's CBI webinar. My name is Ceri Thomas. Great pleasure, as ever, to be hosting these webinars in conjunction with the CBI. This is actually the third in a three-part sort of mini-series within these webinars, looking at one of the most pressing issues around, which is to do with shortages of labour and skills. And if you've missed the previous two episodes, you can find the whole box set on the CBI website if you want to go there and catch up. The exam question that we've set ourselves this morning is to do with how companies are using technology to overcome shortages. I think one thing the pandemic did for all of us was to dramatize just how much technology can change our ways of working, often for the better, but often with challenges attached as well. Unfortunately, we've got some great experience with us in the room this morning to help us understand how companies are coping, how they're using that technological potential to overcome shortages. We've got Naomi Weir, who's Programme Director of Innovation at the CBI. Naomi, good morning. I'll come to you very soon. We've got Andy Meads, Head of Analytical Development and Insight at UK Greetings. We've got Paul Durkin, Chief Customer and Innovation Officer at Wincanton. And we've got James Milligan, who's the Global Head of Technology at Hays. So we've got great sort of sectoral insight. We've got Paul looking across a whole logistics supply chain setup, and we've got James with an even wider lens on the problem. So we do, of course, as ever on these calls, want to hear from you. Your calls help the conversation, your messages help the conversation, but also they help the CBI understand what's going on at grassroots level. So I think they're useful. They feed into those conversations with government that the CBI is having all the time. So they're tremendously useful insights in both respects. So you'll see a button that you can send a message in via. Do message us. I'll bring those points into the conversation. If you want to make a point anonymously, then just write anon at the top of your point and we will deal with it in confidence, of course. But let me get going. And Naomi, good morning. Let me come to you.
Hi, nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Let's start, as we always do, with a quick sort of look around. What are the big things you've seen happening across the landscape that businesses should be aware of in the last week or 10 days?
Brilliant. Yeah, so thank you. Just before we get into the main topic for today, I'll quickly run through a couple of the important events from last week. So obviously everyone's grappling with shortages, which we will get into, but also over the last week, CBI made its first big intervention of 2022. So in case you missed it, Tony Danker, our DG, sat down with journalist Robert Colville, Director at the Centre for Policy Studies, and really made the case for a more ambitious growth trajectory for the UK economy. So its purpose was really to set the tone for the spring. So on really going for growth at next month's spring budget, which is expected on the 23rd of March. So in that, it put forward 5 new ideas for us to get really serious about growth. So that could be from a kind of permanent investment deduction through to a skills challenge fund. So there's lots in there. If you missed it, you can now watch it back online. So Alice, one of my colleagues, can post that in the chat. But this is really only the start of the campaign. Over the next 6 weeks, we'll be developing those ideas further. And the best way to do that is to hear from members. So would be great to hear from you, and please do get in touch with your thoughts. But also we'll be doing various activities across social and other platforms. So do get involved so that business's voice on this can really be heard on the importance of really going for growth. Second big thing this week was around energy price caps. So this week we saw government stepping in to help consumers in line with some of CBI's asks in this space. But we're doing a bit more to push on what help for businesses in this space looks like as well as consumers. And then the third big thing from this week was the long-awaited publication of the government's Levelling Up white paper. So this is government's kind of cross-cutting policy agenda to improve access and opportunities and address kind of regional disparities across the country. And there's a lot to unpack with the exec summary running to 17 pages. I'm sure you'll all have read the 300 plus pages that were in there, but you'll be pleased to know there is a digest for members on our website, which you could take a look at, or do get in touch with your account managers around that. But also, in brief, what was good, what else do we need to see from it? So, good thing there was a clear analysis of the situation, tackles some of the coverage gaps and sets out some of the preferred models around devolution and how to get there. And it broadly recognises the role that clusters can play in regional growth, and obviously that's a big area that CBI is doing work in with members at the moment. There are also some things we think that could have been better, kind of of clarity around the role of private sector in delivery of this agenda, as well as some of concerns about lack of funding for some of the initiatives in there to actually get them across the line and have an impact. So some of those things need to be addressed. There's lots more in there to unpack, so please do take a look at that more broadly, but also do feed in any reactions on views on that to the CBI, and to find out more on those, we can pop some links in the chat as well.
All right, great, Naomi, thank you for that. Help us set the scene on today's conversation from your sort of chair as Programme Director for Innovation at the CBI. Give us your sort of big thoughts on the role of technology in that conversation.
Of course. So, in response to labour shortages, technology is part of the solution. We're not talking here about all of the solution, but that's why we've got a mini series of these. But really, it really can be an important part of the solution. It can help businesses strengthen key business metrics and continue to perform in an uncertain environment. And CBI members have been telling us, and we'll be hearing more today, about how their investment in technology is helping drive up things around productivity and around operational resilience, particularly in quite uncertain times. So, what can this look like? This can look like such a broad range of things, from kind of automatic guided vehicles in warehouses, freeing up employees in other areas, or it could be around adopting AI solutions to automate certain backroom tasks, from HR data to help make that a more efficient process that actually works for people better, or it could be things to do with kind of reducing reliance on physical labour to carry out, maintenance activities, improving employee safety. There's a whole range of things that it can do, regardless of the labour shortages situation. But actually, there's a new impetus for this discussion, given that circumstance. So, the data around this sort of investment is really positive. A study from McKinsey found that adoption of existing technology, so those tried and tested technologies that are out there, could boost productivity across every sector, about kind of 1.5% per year productivity uplift. And for 70% of firms that have been surveyed around this, new technologies have really improved business resilience, which is an important thing that all businesses are grappling, particularly in some of this shortages environment. So notably then, transformation in the face of current labour pressures, has really shifted the narrative away from a kind of technology versus people, technology as a threat to jobs, but actually firms are really innovating to fill those gaps in the workplace and create really good value jobs. And that's always been the case, but actually the narrative and the ability to really press ahead on this agenda and make progress is something that this current environment actually requires as well as enables. So I think members have really highlighted that it's also playing an important role in employee attraction, retention and satisfaction. Firms want to be seen as innovative to attract the best talent, and people in digitally enabled workplaces are also kind of 50% more likely to have strong job satisfaction. So there's lots of different factors to this where it plays into this role around labour shortages, from actually addressing productivity problems through to attracting and retaining talent. So there's quite a few areas where it really factors into this discussion.
Okay, Naomi, before I come to the rest of the panel, I guess there's a danger that in the course of this conversation, I'll trot out the idea that the pandemic, and maybe this sort of more recent period of sort of overheating supply chains, has been a game changer, without actually knowing if it's true or not. So from your vantage point, are you seeing evidence that actually the idea that old trends have been accelerated or new things have happened has actually been a fact on the ground?
So I think in this particular circumstance, this has always been important, and for certain firms, they've really got ahead of the game and have kind of taken hold of this agenda and seen the benefits. I think for other firms, it's kind of come to crunch point, and they've recognised it's moved from an important longer term thing to an urgent thing. So I think that's really where the shift has been, rather than whether this is a kind of good idea or not for businesses.
Okay, great. Listen, Naomi, I will come back to you in the course of the conversation, so but thanks for that. I want to start just by going around Paul, James and Andy, just to understand you from their part of what labour shortages, what skill shortages. So, Andy, let me start with you, but before I ask you that question, just give us a really quick sort of pencil sketch of UK Greetings, because it's a company that maybe not everybody will know.
Yeah, UK Greetings, we manufacture, supply greeting cards to many retailers across the UK, Asda, Sainsbury's, Tesco, lots of independent retailers. And I guess kind of over the last 18 months, we've been really investing in our technology and software to look to revolutionise our analytical capabilities. We've rolled out Tableau and Alteryx across the business to really focus on improving our data modelling capabilities, reporting automation, and also to increase our reporting frequency. So how do we deliver actionable insights for our customers? And I think at the start of, over the last 18 months, at the start of that process, we did have a skills gap. So for us, it was, do we look to recruit to bring people in with these experience of these modern BI tools, or do we upskill our current workforce? And we kind of came up with a bit of a fusion of the two. We decided on an upskilling program of our current employees, but also look to couple that with apprentice recruitment as well. So I think a key driver for that, for the lack of candidates, for pushed us in that direction, but also how important creating opportunities for our current workforce is. We know that is really key to them, and they have a lot of great experience that we want to maintain within the business. So kind of over 18 months, we've now got over 25 Tableau and Alteryx developers, over 350 reports available internally into our external customers. And I think more what we have achieved through upskilling and automation will look to offset that skills gap for the future and ease those current labour kind of shortages or skill shortages. And I think our key focus is all on that future talent and how we develop it internally, really.
And Andy, how long did it take you to realise that the people you initially were looking for out in the market weren't going to be there?
I think very quickly when certain roles, or for instance BI, like entry-level BI analyst roles were out there, looking for experience of some of these new software packages we were using, there really weren't many candidates on the market, and that was certainly a key factor for why we kind of went down more of an apprenticeship route and an upskilling route.
Okay, and it wasn't just a question. Could you, if you paid enough, could you have got the people, or they're simply not there?
I think so, yeah. I think we were looking for at least 5 to 10 developers, and the shortage, but in all honesty, to get someone with 5 years experience, it is expensive. So do we look to, obviously over time we've got to retain that talent that we are developing with those skill sets, but also making sure that we keep that benefit of our employees' skill sets and experience within the business itself, really.
Yeah. Okay, Andy, I'll come back to you because I think it's rather a nice story, actually. The way you've gone about it chimes nicely with what Naomi was saying earlier on. But I think, and also I presume it opens up opportunities, in different parts of the company that you've taken these people from. So in the round, it feels good. We'll find out a bit more shortly. Paul, let me come to you, Wincanton.
Yep.
I appreciate this is, yours is a big company to look across, but if can you give me a sort of readout on where you've experienced the most acute labour and skills shortages?
Yeah, thanks, Ceri, and hi everybody. Wincanton's a people business. Okay, 20,000 people in an industry which is heavily people focused. Driving, working in warehouses, etc. I think the market pre-COVID certainly was getting tighter. That's fair to say, and I think we've all we're working hard to make our industry a more attractive place, and certainly the feature of technology is a big part of that. I think certainly with with COVID and a combination of factors as well. I think COVID impacting particularly channel shift, how people buy, particularly online. The coincidence of Brexit as well at that point in time really accelerated the pinch points in a number of areas, a lot of which have been clearly very publicly played out. So drivers, key area of focus, people working in warehouses, perhaps not as highly sensitive but still significant for organizations like ourselves, particularly with the channel shift to more e-fulfillment. And I think alongside that, and picking up some of the points that Andy's just made, where Wincanton is as an organization is really, having lived through that last 18 months, 2 years, we're accelerating a lot of our our original plans around how we use technology with people. So this isn't an either or. It's how do we best blend effectively what's a traditional people business with technology on a number of fronts. And a few simple examples of that, deploying robotic cleaners, deploying automation to destuff containers, traditionally less attractive jobs, let's face it. If it's hard to attract people into an organization, then let's try and automate some of the less attractive areas of it. So those are point automation opportunities. And then without doubt, a real sort of race for space in terms of robots, AMRs specifically, and a greater focus really on where we can engineer in automation to our core solutions. Now, I think if you looked at the pre-COVID situation, there was a lot of talk, rhetoric around, robots replacing people. That's not the case. And the last 18 months, 2 years has actually shifted us to a place where, where as an industry we're struggling to attract and retain, then automation and robotics are helping us and are complementing that situation. So I think for the near to medium term, that's kind of where we'll sit.
Yeah, and Paul, I guess you're right. We the people watching your sector probably think that we have a sort of readout on whether the problems are severe or less severe, whether it's in the news or out of the news. So at the moment, we might think actually supply chain issues have been a bit less front of mind, a bit less prominent. Has the problem started to go away? What's the truth? Are you seeing skills shortages ease, or are you just dealing with the best as the news just moved on?
I think it's fair to say that there has been a slight easing from a sort of demand and supply perspective. I mean, clearly having come through a traditional peak period in our industry, both from a sort of online cyber weekend in November and then traditional peaks in December. So January, February, generally are slightly less intense in that respect. So and hence almost a sort of foot on the ball, taking stock type moment, I think, for us as an organization, but I think for all of us in this industry right now, it's we've all started, we've worked hard to try and understand how we attract and retain more in the industry. So where we're at the moment really is wanting to make up some of that ground that perhaps as an industry we've lost in the last year or two with a huge amount of demand on us, and how we get ourselves ahead of that curve. So still absolutely focused on all of those initiatives, and still have to work really hard to build that supply, but we've got a little bit more headroom to do it at the moment.
Okay, all right, Paul, thank you. James, let me come to you, head of technology, global head of technology at Hays. So I'm going to give you a huge canvas to paint on. What are you, from your vantage point, where are you seeing the sort of the most significant shortages of skills and labour?
I'm speaking really broadly here. It's across the areas of STEM in reality. Technology is obviously probably the key area because of the acceleration of digital transformation that Paul's obviously referenced and Andy's referenced previously. So we had a skills shortage prior to pandemic. It's just been exacerbated now by the accelerations organisations aligned to the new world that's coming out of that. I think the agenda around ESG is driving job creation in that area, and the skills are not necessarily available at this moment in time. And then more just generally in the areas of construction, life sciences and marketing, there's a real demand for talent, and there isn't enough out there at the moment. So, I mean, just looking at sort of a macro view, very high demand in the UK, very high demand globally, right, in all of these areas, and not enough skilled candidates. More candidates than there were, but not enough skilled candidates to meet the accelerated demand.
And what's happened, presumably you're dealing with sort of global movements of people, skilled people coming into this country to fill positions. Has that picked up, or is that what's the picture there since Brexit, I suppose?
I think what's happened since Brexit is probably employers are more flexible and looking at talent within the country initially. So in the past, you would have been office bound for most jobs. Now that there's less of a requirement for that now. So you have organisations that will look at talent anywhere within the country to work as part of a team, and I think that's opened up opportunities to organisations to be more flexible about how they think about they hire. That's certainly happened. I think in terms of international talent across borders, there's still challenges there. We are seeing organisations, particularly in the sort of startup and scale-up sector, where they're actually location agnostic. They're hiring anybody within a 3-hour time zone, as long as they can do the job, and they'll deal with the problems of borders. So I think there's certainly a much more flexible approach to where people are based to do the job.
Okay, and if I ask you to get your crystal ball out and tell me whether the skills, the gap that you're seeing between jobs and the available skills is going to persist or close over the next 5 years, what do you think?
I think we'll create more talent, but I think the demand's going to increase. So I think there's going to be a gap for the next 5 years. And it's incumbent, I suppose, on business, government, education to work together to look at initiatives to close that gap. There's some great things going on at the moment. Andy's referenced the apprenticeships scheme. I think we'll see that increasingly used in this area. I think it's great that you're already embracing that, and I think we're going to see even more demand there. I think organisations are having to become a lot more flexible in terms of the criteria that they look at for the talent they want. To Andy's point, you're not going to find somebody necessarily with 5 years experience, right? But there could be really talented people out there, maybe, they have a family domestic situation, which means that they can't work standard hours. In the past, that might be problematic. Maybe not now. We've got people maybe who are returning to the workforce or leaving the military. We need to start tapping into this unexpected talent which is out there to start addressing some of these skill shortages. So I think it's a big opportunity for us to do things differently.
Okay, great. James, thank you for that. Let me just jump back to you for a second, because I guess one of the fundamental points of these conversations is to figure out what businesses can learn from each other. In that regard, what do you think businesses can learn from each other when it comes to adoption of technology?
I think even from this morning, we're seeing that adoption of technology isn't constrained to some businesses, and certainly, over the pandemic, some businesses might have seen themselves as innovative or those likely to be technology adopters before. That's kind of been blown out of the water. So, we've seen the benefits of innovation and actually the urgency of it in some circumstances, which I think has kind of helped wider businesses see, okay, this is something that we can do. We flexed our muscles in this territory, but let's try and keep moving along that journey. We've seen the kind of the basics around kind of, in some industries, the sort of remote working, but actually some of the unexpected kind of environmental and productivity benefits of having to, for example, suddenly make operations paperless. That was a big thing that we've seen across a lot of businesses that has a lot of knock-on effects in terms of what you're then able to do. But I think, there's a few key things that we've learned from businesses over this time of what businesses have been doing to do this successfully. One is really actually start with the problem, not the tech. So don't get kind of sidetracked into, oh, this business did this tech, or it's not about the tech. Figure out what your problem is and what you need in order to deliver. So, every business is on its different stage of technology adoption. And so, you need to make sure that you're getting the solution you need rather than you've got the tech and you need to do something with it. So really start with the problem rather than the tech. And this is especially true when looking to deploy kind of data-driven technologies like AI. That word's thrown around a lot, and people, we should adopt some AI. But research really shows that businesses that take a proactive and a strategic approach to AI adoption see higher profit margins and whereas partial AI adopters who kind of dabble actually don't see those returns. They're sort of similar to non-adopters in terms of the profit on the back of that. So, in FS, strategic AI adopters have a kind of 12% higher profit margin boost compared to non-adopters or the kind of dabblers. And same in healthcare, it's actually up to 16% boost. So the strategic approach is really important, and that means diagnose your problems and don't start with the tech. I think another big area we've heard a bit of, but is about engaging with suppliers. you need to really make sure that you can understand what those can deliver for you, and really engaging directly with suppliers to get to grips with what their solutions can offer is really important for businesses. And we've heard a bit about this already, but involve your people. Getting culture right is hard, but it's completely crucial. So giving people time to understand the technologies you're trying to implement, why you're looking at those, and how they would use them can really make a difference. There's no point adopting if it's not going to be widely used and baked in. So, members have done this by establishing kind of forums across sort of different sections or departments, helping leaders understand the concerns of staff. Like we've said, it's not about kind of people or tech, it's the combination, but actually those concerns can be real when concerns come in about what does this mean for my job. You need to really engage with that as a business and be seen to be doing that by your employees, and really set out how the issues that are raised are going to be addressed. So really involve your people. Also, they might be really well placed to understand what the problems are and how you could address it better. So really involve them in the solutions, not just in the deployment. And then, tap into your networks, talk to others about how they've addressed challenges. This forum's part of that, but CBI has long highlighted a kind of be more magpie approach. Look around and see what others have done, not just to kind of take the technology, but actually understanding what's possible and actually where there are some quick wins. Let's help each other do that. It's kind of win-win across the board. So, in that, there's a useful checklist from our 2018 report, Be More Magpie, people can go back to, but it's includes things about be cautious about customization. If it can do 80% of the job, get it in and do it quickly. There's a lot of things like that, some really practical tips that we've got in some of our back catalogue that we can make sure kind of links are sent to around. But there's those kinds of things, and there's also wider support out there for this. There's a recognition this is a UK benefit, not just a business benefit, and so there is support out there. I'll come to a bit more of that, but there's some of that within CBI. There's organisations at the more emerging tech end, like the Knowledge Transfer Network, that can provide valuable insight into how firms across the economy are successfully deploying technology that we can tap into as well.
Okay, but don't dabble, folks. I've written that down myself, so thank you, Naomi. I want to pick up on a couple of threads and come to you, Andy. So from Naomi, we've heard a couple of times now that the solution won't be just tech, it'll be tech and people. And we've heard from James that the skills gap is likely to persist for quite a long time. So I want to come back to your sort of case study, Andy, which is, so you're confronted with this problem. You want this new analytical software, it's going to be important for the business, but you can't find the skills in the market to fill actually quite a number of positions that you're looking to fill. Presumably that looks like a real problem initially, but then tell me how you sort of go through that and what's been involved in training people up from inside.
Yeah, I think upskilling a large number of employees across the organisation initially in a pandemic, whilst working from home, was a challenge. And I think the biggest challenge was upskilling, but at pace. We wanted to move at pace because we want to deliver the best results to our customers. I think there's probably three key ways we address this. Firstly, to offset the labour shortages, we, as I mentioned, embarked on an apprenticeship recruitment programme. It's actually, I think, National Apprenticeship Week as well this week, so it's relevant. But we employed 8 data technician apprentices who work across all areas of the business. And the talent we've been able to bring in has been pretty exceptional. And it's just been amazing to watch the speed of learning and how quickly they've developed. I think they've got no necessarily previous understanding of analytical software, etc. So what they've come in is what they know. It's been really refreshing. And again, as I mentioned, which I think will be a key thing, is how we actually continue to retain those individuals. Now we are, they have those in-demand skills. Probably secondly, we know from our engagement surveys that flexible working is important, and we've set up an analytical kind of working zone, working hub within our office, where analysts from around the business can come in, share learnings, train and develop with each other. And I think it's been a really good way to install that for us, that analytical thinking across the organisation. And I don't think we could have achieved what we have in the timescales without that face-to-face contact as well. I think particularly for an apprentice, if it's your first role, might be your first time you've ever kind of sat behind a computer for a job, and it's been so important for us. And I think for us, it's how we ensure we continue to get that great balance of home and office, kind of to install that culture as we're developing individuals, and particularly with these apprenticeship programs. Finally, I'd probably say we made use of free resource wherever we can. Our software providers have got great online learning tools, but online forums we've used, often tell the guys just look on YouTube, you know, and we work with a really good partner in Interworks as well, who provide the software and give us analytical support as well. So I really think making use of that free resource has been a real benefit for us.
Brilliant. Okay, so I mean, it's a lovely story. I really like it. Paul, let me come back to you, because I'm intrigued about how you identify where technology or kind of automation you've been talking about can help the business. Where does that conversation sit? Does that bubble up from underneath, or is that a board level conversation? How do you map the opportunities? Paul, you're on mute. I think we need to unmute you.
I think I'm unmuted. Good. Yeah, it comes from both of those areas, Ceri. I think that I mean, take my role, for example. So my role is a new one in the organization, you know, focusing on our future. And the big part of that future is technology based. It's about how we innovate, it's about how we create products that really serve our customers' needs in the next, you know, decade and beyond. Now, that's a good example of how we're investing, I suppose, really in the time and the headroom to create thinking, to create, you know, plans to bring some of this stuff to bear. And I'm a big believer in, you know, doing stuff. So it's great to connect, it's great to learn, but it's also great to do stuff. So having, you know, stood up our first robots, you know, middle of last year, we're now on with, you know, we've signed up a big investment internally, and that, you know, big scale robot deployment will happen middle of this year. And that's one of a multiple of different projects that are happening in that respect. So there's very much a leadership part to that. But I think Naomi made a very good point there around, you know, start with the problem you're trying to solve, not with the technology. And I think that resonates very much from a practical point of view, because that's where our colleagues, you know our business in a way that I don't, for example. So they understand, you know, the intricacies of what we're trying to achieve, maybe around, you know, customer order personalization, or what we're trying to achieve in terms of, you know, timeframes to fulfill orders. So it's important that we involve them on that journey, and that we create the right connection between where, you know, the board and, you know, the senior team's investment in time is, with the practical element of how we take them on the journey and explain, you know, why we're doing what we're doing. And that's a journey I think we're all on.
Yeah. Okay. James, let me jump back to you, because I asked you before to sort of stand on the top of the Hayes skyscraper and look all around and describe the landscape for me. But if I ask you to sort of actually look inside Hayes, and how you've responded as a company to the challenge of automation, to the challenge of technology, to the opportunities of technology, what have you done yourselves?
So we've done quite a lot. I think if you look at some of the comments that Paul and Andy have made previously, we've looked internally around how we can automate some of those more monotonous tasks, right, which are repetitive, so that we can focus our community on more interesting and productive tasks. I think, you know, that's something that we've invested in a lot in the last number of years. We've created our own internal learning program that was also available to our customers, called My Learning, where our consultants can log in. They can access, you know, content from a whole host of different providers, where it's aggregated, whether that be technical skills that they want to develop because they want to learn, for example, about Power BI, or whether it's around soft skills that people want to focus on developing. So we have that platform. So to Andy's point earlier around giving people the ability to access content and sort of self-learn, I think, you know, that's something that we've done well. As I said, we deployed that into the business. And more broadly speaking, we're looking at how we can utilize technology both internally and externally, sort of to augment what the services we can provide and to our employees and our candidates. So, for example, we're invested at the moment in a platform which our software developers internally and our software developers externally can utilize to track their own personal development in terms of their skills, create a portfolio in terms of the work they're able that they've done, understand areas for learning, actually have a little bit of competition internally for those guys to remain engaged and understand how they're benchmarked against other people within the business and where they need to focus in terms of their development. So we really probably accelerated investment and tried to be innovative in the way that we use technology. And I suppose what we also do is we look at it through the lens of our staff, but also if it works for our staff, if it's relevant to our staff, our customers, and vice versa. So a lot of the products and services we have, we look at through both an internal and external lens.
Yeah, James, let me just stay with you for a minute, because I think one of the interesting threads of this conversation, which a couple of people have raised, is that we're moving away from the old dichotomy of people versus technology, people versus machines, to how we work together, how technology can increase productivity, improve working conditions and all that. What have you seen on how is technology changing to enable that way of working? What do you see, and how should companies think about, as I said, that collaborative approach to technology and people?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the obvious benefit, which I don't think would have happened at the rate it has, is obviously this move to hybrid working, right? And that's technology enabled, and that vastly has improved the quality of life for many people, right? And obviously now that we're coming out the other side of this, organisations have had to adjust. So for me, I suppose that's one key area, and probably the biggest sort of benefit that we can see in the short term. Then it's like, how do you continue to have that sense of sort of collaboration, maintain culture when you are some of the time together in the office and some of the time distributed? So again, that's driving innovation around the way that we use platforms to ensure that we retain that connectivity, because there's some risks as well with this new hybrid world, right? So we have to look at that. And I think it's really focused the mind in terms of what the experience should be for employees and for our customers digitally. So again, that's driving innovation. I talked about automation earlier, RPA. If you've got somebody working in the finance department doing a repetitive task, and we have a skills shortage, let's remove that repetitive task and let's focus that individual on the higher value task where they get more satisfaction out of doing that. So I think there's a whole host of implications that we've seen from the pandemic, but I think the reality is traditional organizations, maybe the ones that were changing but changing slowly, large enterprises, maybe large public sector organizations, now that pace of change and that adoption of technology and that collaboration between the human and that technology means that we're seeing a very different world that may have taken us 8 or 10 years to get to, right? And I also think with the pace of change, because people know that we can do it, right? And in the past, maybe we didn't think we could or didn't want to, but we've had to. I don't think that we'll ever, the pace of change will ever go back to the way it was. I think we're going to continue to see lots of development in this area. And as you said, we're going to have the technology that augments what the human does, or adds value to what the human does, makes the job more interesting, deals with some of the issues around skill shortages. So I'm very excited really around what the next 5 to 10 years is going to bring.
Yeah. Paul, is that collaborative person and machine approach important to you? Because you talked before about jobs that could be difficult jobs, that cleaning jobs or whatever, that could be done by a machine instead of a person. But then you talked about ideas sort of bubbling up from the grassroots, and I wonder if I was working in the sort of shop floor at Wincanton, whether I would I could see a job that I'd prefer a robot instead of me doing it, but whether I could see that sort of collaborative, I'm less certain. Does that sharing of responsibilities feel like it's going to be part of Wincanton's future as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think a good example that comes to mind with the robots that we deployed last year effectively take the physical pushing of trolleys to pick customer orders away from the colleague, from the person. So the person is focusing on effectively picking the correct product, and the movement of the trolley and the the multiple orders that they're picking is what is done by the robot. So it's a perfect example really of where both of those things come together. And I think that's not all automation is of that type, but increasingly I think people that are working, first of all, the challenge is how we attract and retain into the industry. So we're trying to bring more people in, and by making more of a feature of how we're doing that, we're more likely to attract people, because to be frank, we're absolutely competing. I mean, just listening to some of the skill sets that Andy was talking about, they're exactly the skill sets that we're bringing into this organization at a pace. Data analytics, software development being two prime examples. So when I'm talking to my 19-year-old son about a career in supply chain, then when I talk about robots and I show him the videos of what we're doing, it's a very different picture to being in a dark, dingy way, and that's a really important part of how we've got to present ourselves going forward.
Yeah. Okay. We are amazingly nearly out of time, but Naomi, let me just come back to you, because I know we've touched a lot on what businesses can learn from each other. Seen some fascinating case studies in the course of the conversation. What's the role of, you're in constant dialogue with government. What's the role of government in enabling and supporting all this? You're on mute. Oh.
Apologies. Just come in on that last bit where some of the data backing this up around job satisfaction increases. Improving worker safety is a really important area. So 20% accident rate reduction in oil and gas sector where IoT solutions are in place, or actually improving equality. So an increase in 7% of applications by female candidates where machine learning is used to debias job ads. And actually that's a really important narrative to tell when we're saying actually what's the role of government in this, because there is a wider societal benefit to businesses doing this well, but it's also really helping businesses, given the current headwinds facing them, to take advantage of now to do it. And so that's where this impetus of, it is a really business-led issue, but there is now a real impetus and role for government in supporting that, particularly at the moment. So some of that we're seeing in terms of some practical support at the kind of business basics end, thinking about the Help to Grow scheme, and we're in discussions with government about the future of that. So that's providing discounts on management courses, as well as kind of some technology adoption at the basic end to help productivity, like CRM or e-commerce or accounting software, some of those sort of business basics. And actually, to have impact at scale and respond to some of those business needs, we think there's, potential to expand that to a wider range of technologies, for example. But there's that kind of support that we're in discussion with government about, recognizing the productivity benefits as a country for helping businesses get on with this. There's also things at the kind of more emerging technology end, and government kind of picking up on CBI's real press to see the need for not just thinking about how can we support businesses to develop emerging technologies, but actually to get that wider adoption piece so that we get the broad benefits of it. And I think that's an area where there's sort of new remits within the innovation strategy for the kind of more emerging technology end of support through Innovate UK, for example. And there's also a lens on this in the Levelling Up white paper. So actually thinking about spreading these opportunities across the country and thinking about what these roles look like for people across the country. How can we make sure that some of these opportunities are kind of dispersed, and there's work particularly in that space around the clusters, and what does that look like for helping kind of adoption and diffusion of cutting edge technology into perhaps using the kind of economic clusters model. And that's a really great way for businesses to learn from each other as they're surrounded by others. And also it's a way of pooling talent, because there's kind of lower risks for an individual moving to an area where there's actually quite a few job options around. So there's lots of potential ways that could look like, but certainly be really keen to hear from members on ways we think CBI should be vocal in this area on their behalf.
Brilliant. Okay, Naomi, thank you very much for taking us out. We are comprehensively out of time. I've really enjoyed it. Andy, James, Paul, thank you all for your contributions. I hope it's been helpful. I hope you'll join us again this time next Wednesday for the next of these webinars. But for now, thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon.